I'm going to show you how the Stencil page works. So you upload a picture first, and let's just try this Taylor Swift picture here. You can lower the opacity here, and then you can resize the picture, and that will affect the outcome of the stencil. So you can try out some different sizes if you're not getting the result you want. So let's try it photo. As you can see, that you get a new layer panel here on the right, and then you get settings on the left. I would personally lower the threshold here a little bit to get a bit more of the hair and stuff like that, and then you can increase the neighborhood. That is basically saying how far each pixel should look around to find if it's part of the stencil or not. So if we now clean it up a little bit, as you can see, it's always going to be hard for a stencil algorithm to, find everything. So now we could just try out drawing the rest. We can add this here, and maybe even adding the lines in the close here. We could add them here. It's just to show what's possible to do. I'm not gonna go through everything here, but so I can add here, but I can also click here and make this into a draw layer. So now I've made the stencil layer into a draw layer, which means I can't change the settings of the stencil anymore, but I can now also combine these two by clicking on the first one and then clicking and holding on the second one. So now I have all the stencil on the same layer, and I can now erase from that layer if I want to, or draw more to it, or whatever I prefer to do. And then when I print the stencil, I can resize it, obviously, and then I can also, what I like to do is to add the alignment corners, because if you're gonna put it on more pages, let's say put it on 2 pages, you see how it creates that extra overlap there. And then if you click print, the alignment corners in the corner, you can make a stencil of page 1 and page 2 and then put them on top of each other. And if you align the crosses, then you're good to go. So that is essentially how you make a stencil for a photograph. I will show a few more examples. If I drag the layer panel to the left, it deletes that. So now I've kind of deleted the other stencil I had here. So let's try a different kind of photo, something more line oriented. Here's just a lot of screenshots. So for example, this picture here would be interesting to see. So now we've uploaded the photo, and now we can try, for example, lines. And again, it's always beneficial to lower the opacity on the picture itself, just to see better what we're doing. And so if I click on the layer panel, now I can see the settings here, and I can lower the threshold, which will give me a bit more. I can increase the canvas size. And what that does is just takes a larger version of the picture and runs the algorithm on that, which will result in slower stencil time, but will also often give you a more detailed stencil. Not necessarily better, depends on what you're doing. And so essentially this is what we got here. I could probably fine-tune this a bit, but let's say that we are happy with that. But there's another way that I actually prefer to this one, because this one creates some of the gradients as well. So if I just delete this to show you, if you use the gradient one, essentially the way that works is it gives you on the left there it gives you the percentages on the gradient slider. That essentially says where in the picture to make a line, so at what brightness level. So this works really well if you have a picture that has gradients. You can see next to one of the Powerpuff Girls, the line is changing now because I'm changing where to draw the gradient line, and now I changed another one. So you can essentially play around until you find where you want, and if you drag them to the left, you delete them. So I deleted the one for the darkest one, and now I feel like I have something more in the direction of what I want. So if I now show the picture underneath again, we start to see that we have something here. It is missing some stuff there, and I could obviously go back here and add some more gradient lines to find those things. Like this, probably about there. Yeah, maybe this one needs to go. Nope, we wanted that one. So maybe one of the ones higher up needs to go, or we can just drag this one a bit down. So essentially, yeah, so now we are closer. I'm sure this one here on top is fairly unnecessary. So as you can see, we're getting somewhere here. So it's just a question of finding those things in the picture. You can obviously do the same here. You can draw on the thing. You can blur the image, and that's going to change how it basically blurs the picture before it runs the algorithm. Just to show you some of the other stencil modes, I'm just going to hide this one here. And if we go for shadow, that essentially takes anything between the lower and the higher gradient stops, we can call them. So if I lower this one to 0, now it takes everything from the darkest up to 0.7, but if I lower that to 0.2, you can see it only takes the darker parts of the picture. So you can essentially find, like for example here, it's essentially only taking a certain color range and making lines for it. You can change the line spacing or the line width depending on, and you can essentially fill it out. So yeah, that is useful for certain things, like in terms of realism and stuff. You can often see the darker parts of the picture where they are. So and then let's just try the photo setting on this picture. So even if it's for a photo, it doesn't necessarily only work for a photo, as you can see. And then I'm just gonna try the pattern one. So if I close the picture here, so that works for certain things. I would probably think that this would be something I would use for realism rather than, but the good thing here is, yeah, rather than something like this, but the good thing here is you can still run this through a stencil machine and print this out, because it's not an actual gradient. It's just different sized dots essentially. And then some people want to have grids, and that is essentially for when you're tattooing and you want to see where things are. So if I just turn this off here just to show you, the next step here is, let's see, we like this one here, for example. Yeah. Okay, so what I can do now is I can go into tattooing here. So now that shows me, if I just hide this for a moment, now that shows me the picture that I'm going to be tattooing, and I can choose if I want to see the photo or the stencil. But what it does is when you click with your, or tap with your finger on the screen, it now shows you the stencil on top. That obviously might not be quite as relevant for this as for other things, because it's quite obvious where the lines are laying in this photo. But if I show you quickly, if we do the Taylor Swift photo once again, we'll just delete this one, we will delete this one, and this one, and this one. So now we have this one, and we just play a little bit with the settings here. And now we get back to where we were earlier, kind of. And then we go back to this. So now you see this photo, and now when I click this here, it shows me the stencil on top, but I can also make the picture lower opacity. So as you can see, it's not changing the opacity of the picture in general, it's just changing the opacity for when you tap with your finger. And also on the bottom, when you're tattooing, you can click low, and that essentially turns off all the lower tones in the picture. So if you're unsure of where something is in the picture in terms of value. So if I, for example, turn off everything except the highest. So now these are the highest tones. So you can see that basically most of Taylor Swift is medium to dark tones. So that's just for if you wanna see. So these are all the dark tones, for example. So that is essentially how you can use this to make stencils from all kinds of pictures.